Welcome to Inspiration and Transformation from the Banks of the Ganga with Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, an American sannyasi living at the Parmarth Niketan Ashram in Rishikesh, India. Sadhvi is president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, a charitable organization bringing education, vocational training, upliftment, and empowerment programs to women and children. Sadhvi is also Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and Director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival. Join the musings of an American sannyasi as Sadhvi shares the wisdom and teachings of her guru, His Holiness Pujya Swami Chidanand Saraswatiji.
Welcome everyone to Inspiration and Transformation from the holy banks of the sacred Ganga River in the land of Rishikesh, India. What do you do when you start feeling like life is not worth living? You get help. You get help immediately. Immediately. You find family members, friends, a hotline, whatever you need, so that you have the time to relearn how worth living life is. Because the dilemma, the tragic dilemma with decisions like suicide is we don't actually allow ourselves the time to see things in a different way. It's like deciding at midnight that you've waited long enough for the sun to rise. Or waiting a little longer, but deciding at 3, fine, forget it, I held on till 3 o'clock. I've waited for the sun to rise, forget it, there is no sun coming. I'm going to end it. What you need at that time is someone who can just sit with you for another few hours until the sun actually rises. Sometimes it's in the case of deep depression. It can be days. It can be weeks. It can be months. But we absolutely have to find a way to hold on, knowing that there will come a time, whether it's hours, days, weeks, or months later, in which we say, thank God. Thank God I am still here. Thank God that person, that phone call, that hotline number, thank God for this, for that, whatever it may be. Because, oh my God, if I had gone through with it, I wouldn't be here to experience this. The vast majority of us, many more than you would think, go through moments in our life in which we feel like, what is the point of it all? We may not all necessarily really seriously contemplate suicide, but a lot of us do. A very large percent of people actually seriously contemplate suicide. Because there are times in our life when it just seems like that sun is never going to rise. Nothing's going to change. But the nature of nature is it always changes. That is the nature of creation. It always changes. That's good when things are really bad. It's not so good when things are really good. But whatever moment we are in, that saying of this too shall pass is really true. The situations, the circumstances, the things in our world are in constant flux. And so if the sense of life is not worth living, there's two main directions it comes from. One direction is outside, one direction is inside. And so at the risk of oversimplifying, the first group is life isn't worth living because I will never get out of this situation. I am in a family situation, a work situation, a financial situation, a cultural situation, whatever it may be, that is unbearable to me. And that I will, in my mind, I will never get out of it, will never change. What I can tell you is it will always change. Because things always change. But also to recognize that there may be a power you have to change an external situation that you don't realize you have. There's a beautiful story of a little boy who's playing in a sandbox in his front yard. And somehow this massive rock has landed up in his sandbox, and he's very upset by it because this rock is big and it's taking up a lot of his sandbox and it's not allowing him to properly play. And he keeps trying to lift up the rock, but he can't. And his dad is watching him from the upstairs window, just watching his child. And the poor boy keeps trying to move the rock, but the kid is tiny, the rock is big. And he tries to push it and pull it and lift it, and the thing just doesn't budge. And finally, the boy just breaks down sobbing. At which point his dad, of course, comes down and picks him up and says, "What's the problem?" And the boy says, "There is absolutely no way to move this rock." And the dad says to him, "Have you used all of your resources? Have you used everything you have?" And the boy says, "Yes, I have." And his dad says, "You haven't used me." And the dad bends down and he picks up the rock and moves it out of the sandbox. And I love that story because it reminds us of the miraculous power of the universe. And whether we say God in a particular name or form, or just spirit, or just divinity, or just power, energy, whatever word we use, to say there is no way out of this situation is to deny both my own power, because, for example, even if the boy didn't have a father, okay, he might not be able to move the rock today, but give the kid a few months, maybe a couple years, and he'd be able to lift it himself. So even left only to his own devices, if he actually waited long enough, he personally would be able to remove the rock. But in the meantime, he also had other resources. And so when things outside of us seem insurmountable, that they make life not worth living, it means that we're not realizing, number one, the real power we have. And we may not be able to access it in this exact moment, but we will soon if we put our minds to it, fearlessly. It sometimes takes courage. I mean, you take, for example, the example of a woman being abused by her husband. It's a common example. Many women feel, I'll never get out of this. They don't have the resources. Maybe they don't even have the money to support themselves. And so maybe immediately they don't have the resources. But for example, one of the things that we are doing, that our organization does, is help women learn skills to give themselves the opportunity to get out of situations like that and still be able to support themselves and their children. But even otherwise, there's organizations that help. I mean, it's just an example, but she has a lot of resources. If she can get over the fear of what's going to happen to me if I leave this situation. So that's as far as external situations. Either have faith they will change on their own because it's the nature of nature, or realize that there is a power within you, or a power in God, in the universe, that isn't yet fully tapped to help change that situation. But then the other reason that a lot of times people feel like there's no point is from an internal situation. They feel, I will never feel happiness. This depression, this anxiety, this addiction will never leave me. And therefore, life is not worth living. And those are indications that you really, really, really need to reach out your arms and get help. Because there is help. Whatever the internal situation may be, I guarantee you, there is help, there is hope. And I say this to you as someone who herself has suffered internally, has suffered externally, has had thoughts of ending it all. And I now think back and I think, oh my God, can you imagine if I had done that? Can you imagine if at 19, 20, 21, when I was having those thoughts, if I actually had thought that was all my life was going to be? I'm so grateful to the divine every day that I was able to be pulled out of it. And there's no one I know, and I know a lot of people who have struggled with both external situations and internal situations that seemed insurmountable and have thought about actually ending it all. And there's no one I know, not even one situation ever I have experienced, where someone says, God, I wish that I had taken my life when I had a chance. I wish that I had ended it all. 100% of them, every single one, always says, oh my God, thank God I didn't do it. So you have to hang on, and you have to get help. Do not think it's up to you. If you've got family, friends you can reach out to, great. If not, we are here. There are hotlines. I mean, wherever people are watching this from in the world, there's so many resources and people who are there to catch you. Your life is a precious gift, given not by mistake, by the divine. And of course, as we believe very deeply in karma and reincarnation, if you end it now, you just have to come back and do it all over again. So you're not actually getting out of anything. You're not actually making things any better. All you're doing is making them worse, because you're just going to come back and have to relearn exactly the same lessons, but now with the additional added karmic baggage of having thrown away the preciousness of your life. So hold on to it. It's the most precious gift in the world. Yours very specifically.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. Om Times Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Alaya, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Hi, this is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Every 2 minutes, another American is sexually assaulted. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, you are not alone. Help is just a call or click away through the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Please call 1-800-656-HOPE, that's HOPE, or visit rain.org, that's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
Welcome back to Inspiration and Transformation. I'm so glad to have you all back here with me. Is suffering a necessary part of the human condition? Depends how you define necessary. It's certainly a core component of the package deal of human life. In the Buddhist tradition, one of the core foundational truths is life is suffering. But I wouldn't say necessary, and the reason is that it's a core part of the human condition as long as we are identified by our stories, by our bodies, by our histories, by our personalities. And so if we went around, and I won't, it would take too long, but if we did, and I said, tell me why you suffer, because obviously we all have some kind of suffering. I said, tell me why you suffer. Even though we would have different reasons, every one of them would be based in some way on this identification we have with the body, with its story, with its history. So whether it's something like, I suffer because I was harmed in this way by another being. I was betrayed, I was cheated, I was abused by another being, and therefore I continue to suffer that pain, that trauma. Or whether it's I suffer jealousy, envy, competition because I feel like I'm not quite enough, and wherever I look, I see people who are more beautiful than I am, smarter than I am, more successful than I am, more popular than I am, more spiritual than I am, sort of whatever scale I'm using to judge myself. I look around and I see people who are so much better on that scale than I am. And so I want to be where they are. I want to have what they have, and so I suffer. Or maybe it's something interpersonally. I suffer because there is this person in my life who treats me in a certain way, who speaks to me in a certain way, or who is making their own life choices in a certain way. And it's making me suffer. So we'd have a lot of different examples, but they're all based on some sense where I've identified as the history of this body, where it's been, what's happened to it, what's been done to it, what it's experienced. Or I identify by how much it has, how much it can do, how successful it is. Or I identify it based on its relationships. As long as we live like that, suffering is a non-negotiable component of life. The way out of suffering is to disengage, to unhook my inner state, my inner emotional, mental, psychological state from identification with the physical body, with the story. So it is something that is transcendable, which is why spiritual practice, meditation, prayer, service, seva, yoga, sacrifice, all of the things that we do, the study of scriptures to get gyan, wisdom, devotional practices. All of these practices are there to help us out of this false identification. But I would give you an additional point as well. Because everything I've given you so far is pretty much core Buddhism 101 or Hinduism 101. Like this is kind of the foundation of what we're taught. I'd give you another part on a personal level, which is even though the ultimate goal, the ultimate purpose, the ultimate point is to realize that we're not the body, that we are the soul, the spirit, to identify as that instead of as this body and story, to disengage from the history, the personality, all of that, and therefore we'd become free of suffering. It doesn't come by disconnecting yourself from life. And one of the mistakes that a lot of us make on the path is we think that the way to have that experience is to slowly kind of disconnect ourselves. And so what we end up doing is we end up pushing away human life. We end up pushing away love because, oh my God, it's going to lead to suffering. Like, if I love you so much and then you make a choice that I don't agree with, or you're not nice to me, or you do something that hurts me, or God forbid you get sick or die, I'm going to really suffer. And so in my aim not to suffer, in my aim to not identify as body, as relationship, we push away human life. And I don't think that's the goal. I don't think that's the way, and I don't think it's the goal. So neither the journey nor the destination. The moksha, the liberation, the enlightenment, the freedom that we speak about isn't there because we've pushed away human life. It's there because we've realized something so much more. So it's not that we've stopped becoming human. It's that we've realized that we are not just this, we are so much more. And so If you think, for example, about my favorite example of this, most of us identify as this glass. Let's say this glass is myself. Now the glass is filled with water. Rocks come and they fall in the glass. We're going to call those rocks the trials and tribulations of a human life. All the times that people don't treat us the way we want them to. All the times that life just doesn't go the way that if we had a magic wand, we would have made it go. Now, what most of us try to do is we try to push those rocks away. Push away the hurt. Prevent those situations. Try to make the world act the way we want it to. Because otherwise, when the rocks fall in the glass, what happens, right? It splashes all over the place. It's a complete mess. We lose ourselves. But if you take those same rocks and you drop them in the ocean, what happens? Yeah, you don't get barely a ripple. Certainly not a splash that causes all the water to overflow the embankments. It doesn't cause high tide. Nothing happens. And so that enlightenment, that freedom, that samadhi, that whatever word we use, it comes not because I've pushed away human life in order to be free of suffering. It comes because I've realized I'm the ocean, not a glass. I haven't pushed away my glassness. I haven't pushed away the rocks. I've simply embraced my oceanness. I've realized that I am so much more than I've ever identified as. And so these rocks can be there. I can even feel them. I don't have to push them away. But it also doesn't have to drown me or cause all of me to come out all over the edges. Like I don't have to lose myself. And for me, on a personal level, I've noticed there's a lot more suffering the more I try to push away human life. When you embrace human life, yeah, there's always a bit of suffering. You love, you lose. You care about something, it doesn't happen the way you want it to. And it can be something personal or it can be an earthquake in Turkey and Syria, right? It can be anything. But when we love, we suffer. Because we've allowed ourselves to love. But what I've discovered personally is I suffer so much more when I push away that humanity than when I actually embrace it, even with those moments of the suffering, because the suffering it's a mirror. And it allows you to look into it, and it allows you to look into it and say, okay, there is suffering. And then we say, all right, what caused it? Most of the time, it's just our ego. Most of the time, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that person spoke to me in this way. And then you get to look at yourself, and you get to kind of chuckle with love at the humanity of yourself and say, all right, there we go, welcome to the fact that you're still human, right? And you get to kind of just, sort of soothe the ego a bit. You don't take it too seriously. You acknowledge it. All right, that's what it was. Or you look at it and you say, that's suffering because I have a human heart that broke. And I let myself care and love not only soul to soul, which is the core of love, but I also let myself love individual being to individual being. And I was hurt. And then you get to analyze and you get to decide, well, was it worth it? And in most of the cases, yeah, it was worth it. But you get to make a conscious decision. I'm going to consciously decide to realize I am soul, to love from a place of soul, because it's so much bigger and fuller than a place of just one human psyche loving another human psyche. But we also allow ourselves to love from the place of humans, and whether it's human loving human, whether it's human loving tree, human loving river, it's beautiful. And it's beautiful to have that experience, even if it means you suffer when the tree gets cut down, or you suffer when the river is polluted or dries up, or you suffer when something happens to the loved one. But I've found on a personal level that every time I would again choose to have that human experience of love, even if it's going to give me a human experience of suffering. But it's a choice we get to make, and it's certainly not the same choice that everybody makes. There's no right or wrong. I happen to, in addition to loving the soul, I happen to also love the human existence. I think it's a really great gift. And so suffering is part of that package deal. But what happens with spiritual practice is it becomes more conscious. So instead of being a victim of it and having no control over it and letting it overwhelm you, you get to just look at it as part of the human condition. And whether it's suffering because of the ego, and you smile and then you go on about your life. You don't allow yourself to wallow in it. Or whether it's suffering because of a false identification. You've identified too much, incorrectly, without wisdom, as your physical body, or as a particular job you have, or as a particular skill you have, or as a particular rung on a social ladder you have, and it ends up not being where you want it to be. So you suffer, and you look at it and you realize, that was a not so wise decision I made to identify so deeply with that. We see it all the time. We identify as our careers, and then we have to retire, and then not only are you without a career, but you're without a sense of self. Or we identify only as our relationships, and then kids move out, they grow up, they move out. There's a divorce, or there's a death. And then not only are you without the loved one, but you're also without the identity, without the sense of self. And then you look at it and you realize, okay. So I lost myself somewhere there along the way. I forgot who I really was in that. And it's an opportunity for learning. It's an opportunity for growth. It's that mirror that we get to look in. And sometimes it's just that beautiful experience of knowing that you are suffering because you love. And it's a willing, open-hearted, open-armed acceptance of this opportunity we've been given to love with a human heart, knowing that suffering's part of the package deal. So, is it necessary? No, but it's going to be part of most of our lives. And what I would say is, see if you can shift from suffering in the mind, which is the ego nonsense that doesn't serve you at all and just hurts you. See if you can let go of that. Free yourself of that through the introspection, through the gyan, through the remembrance that you are not the body, the career, the bank account, all of that through this really refined spiritual practice. But that suffering in the heart that's there because we love, well, that's up to you. On a personal level, I allow it to be there. Because to me, it's worth it. It's worth the opportunity to love as a human that I know is going to include the suffering as a human. Because that love as a human is beautiful. But see if you can develop the refined discrimination of understanding what is suffering of the mind compared to what is suffering in the heart. What is suffering due to ignorance and ego compared to what is suffering due to the fact that I've allowed myself to really love and would continue to allow myself to really love. And then open yourself up to that. But at the same time, keep reminding yourself over and over again that ultimately at the core, we are soul. And ultimately at the core, none of the suffering is necessary. As we move fully and truly into that ultimate awareness of who we are. But along the way, I don't know, I think being a human is pretty beautiful. And yet, it includes some suffering. But I think it's worth it.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Like Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation. There seems to be two conflicting things. One that says, not only be in the present, but accept everything, no attachments, recognize the perfection of it all. And then the other that says, but wait, people are hungry, people are sick, women are dying in childbirth, people don't have water, trees are being cut down, species are going extinct. We need to act. And how to reconcile those. This is actually one of my favorite topics because I'm very, very committed to social justice, very committed to action. And here's how I understand it. The universe is perfect because the Creator, God, is perfect. Therefore, the creation by the perfect Creator is perfect. To say that we need to do something somehow implies that that Creator might not be perfect. However, in that perfect creation, you are there. You are part of the perfect creation. You're not separate from it. You are a critical, perfect part of the perfect creation. And the tears that you cry when you see children who are starving, or you see people being discriminated against, or whatever it is that fills you with that sense of, I need to do something. Well, that's part of the perfection. It would be like saying, is a flower just as perfect if it no longer has fragrance? Well, fragrance-giving flowers, roses, jasmine, etc., the fragrance is a core part of the perfection of that flower. You could even say it is the dharma of the flower to give the fragrance. From the flower, the fragrance comes. From you, the action comes. Is an apple tree just as perfect if it never gives apples? Well, it's not really fulfilling its dharma as an apple tree, right? If it was created here as a perfection of an apple tree, but it never gave you any apples, it wouldn't really be doing its perfect dharma. Your fruit, your fragrance, is that which you give to the world, which makes the world more perfect. Our world is perfect in the apples that come from apple trees, in the fragrance that come from roses and jasmines. And you responding to injustice is a critical part of the perfection. So for you to say, I'm not going to act, would be like the rose saying, nah, I've decided I'm not going to give any more fragrance. Tired of it. Nobody appreciates me. Forget it. It would no longer be as full and perfect of a rose because it would be denying its very nature. And so that's how I understand that criticalness of action is if we don't act, we are not upholding our perfect part of the perfect creation. In the Bhagavad Gita, which is, in Hinduism we have the Vedas, 4 main ones, but many other ones. The essence of the Vedas is what's called the Upanishads, which are seen as really an essence of the Vedas. So rather than this seemingly infinite amount of text in the Vedas. You have the Upanishads, which are significantly more digestible for those who are not dedicating their entire lives to the study of one particular Veda, for example. The crystallization, the distillation of the Upanishads is said to be the Bhagavad Gita. So imagine you've taken all of the Vedas and you've put it into 700 verses. That's the Bhagavad Gita. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna, the embodiment of God, tells us that we have to act. The entire Bhagavad Gita is about God explaining to us through Arjuna that it is our duty to restore dharma when there is a dharma. A dharma is unrighteousness. Dharma you could consider righteousness. That's what that war was about. Arjuna said, forget it, I don't care, let them keep the land, I'm not going to fight. It's not worth it. Let them have the kingdom. But what Krishna explained to him was, this wasn't a war over land. This was a war over dharma. And that it was Arjuna's duty not to fight for a chunk of land or a kingdom of people, but to fight to restore righteousness, to restore light, to restore dharma. And I take that as a really personal teaching. Because even though we're not in that same exact situation on a battlefield of Kurukshetra, fighting our literal cousins for some land, there's a lot of wars going on today. A lot of us versus them, a lot of greed, a lot of harm, a lot of stealing of each other's rights. And just as Krishna told Arjuna, you need to fight to restore the Dharma. Well, he's telling us the same thing. He didn't tell Arjuna become furious about it. So it's not about lose yourself. It's not about don't be able to eat or sleep because you're so full of rage that you lose your anchoring and grounding. No. But it's about be anchored, be grounded, and then fight. There's a beautiful line where Krishna tells him, remember me and fight the war. Very simple. Remember me means stay connected to God. Don't forget, it's all perfect. It's all me, it's all God, it's all one. Don't forget that. Don't lose yourself in thinking it's all about this battle. Don't lose yourself in thinking that our whole world is all about injustice and discrimination and hunger and poverty. Remember the perfection. Remember that it's all God. And fight the war. Because you've got to restore that Dharma. And that seemingly unreconcilable opposites, when they become that which you meditate upon, that becomes the way that you serve. It becomes yes and, it's not either or. Yes, everything is perfect. Yes, everything is God. And in that perfection is me fighting this battle. Is me restoring this Dharma. And yes, it's all God. And yes, it's all perfect. And tomorrow I will get up again and fight for it again. Because that is part of the perfection, is for me to fight, to make that, to change this. Just because it's perfect doesn't mean it shouldn't be changed. right? It's perfect because it's God. And God is telling you, change this. Yeah. But remember me and remember it's perfect. So don't think it's about you. Don't think it's all on your shoulders. Don't be a chicken with your head cut off. Don't get caught up in the rage, in the narrow vision. Remember me. Stay anchored in me, grounded in me, and fight that war.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Like Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation. So, Padma is the lotus flower. In yoga, there's the posture Padmasana, right? So that's the lotus position. Padma means lotus. And the lotus flower is a very special flower because it grows in the muck. If you see a lotus, it's this beautiful, beautiful, usually white, exquisite, multi-petaled flower that is literally growing out of the dirtiest, muckiest water. And the lesson that we're all given is, be like the lotus. So many of us think in order for me to be peaceful, calm, spiritual, happy, I need the world around me to be different. It's like we were talking at the beginning about the silence and the noise. And Padma reminds us, you don't need anything from the outer world. It's all the inner world that matters. Even growing in the muck, in the dirtiest of the dirty, you can still be fresh, pure, clean, exquisite blossoming. And that's the teaching of Padma, is don't worry about whether it's mucky around you, dirty around you. Don't try to change everybody around you, but just you grow as the beautiful lotus flower. You grow as that flower. And you have the ability to grow as this beautiful, pure, untouched, exquisite being. No matter what world you come from, no matter what's going on in the world around you, no matter anything, however much muck may be there, you can grow as this beautiful flower. And that's the meaning of Padma. Beautiful. Congratulations. A beautiful new name and a beautiful new beginning. This brings to a close this hour of inspiration and transformation. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad to be together with you all each week, and I look forward to being together again next Thursday, same time, on Om Times Radio.